Let me ask you a 912 members question. How many of you have written letters to Congress? Put your hands down. Stop it. Write letters to the Chinese. Tell them to stop loaning us money. Write letters to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Tell him to stop buying T-bills. You don't want them. Here's what you do. Send the Chi-Coms a letter. Tell them, I'm not going to go to work and pay that debt back. Mr. Obama can sell it to you all he wants, and little tiny Tim Geithner can say it's good, but I'm not going to go to work. I'm just not going to pay it back. This really is, I think, a monumental and pivotal, as David McCullough would say, or John Adams would say, epocha in American history. How many of you think we're at a crossroads? Show of hands. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Gold stars are at the table. Pick those up on the way out. By the way, I'm here all week if you want to come back. What we face now here, ladies and gentlemen, is not very much different than what the men that our president calls the so-called founding fathers. Have you heard this latest one? You have heard this. As a young student at Columbia University, Barack Obama was charged with the task of writing a thesis. Now, we're going to give you that piece of paper with your name on it anyways because you got in, but you still got to kind of pretend like you did something here. So he wrote a thesis titled The New Aristocracy in America. In that thesis, 10 pages of it, which have been viewed by one member of the parent press corps, is what I call them. You call them the liberal media, we all have names for them, many of which I can't say in public. Joe Klein of Time magazine viewed this document in September of 2000 and, anybody want to guess? 8. In other words, before this buffoon was elected president, Joe Klein knew, and from Time magazine, a news organization, knew that the soon-to-be president-elect had a genuine disdain for the men called the Founding Fathers. He said so-called Founding Fathers. How many of you think that a guy that thinks we have air fingers, so-called Founding Fathers ought to be the president? About as many of you as want to buy that Barack Obama autographed plate, right? This is fun. We're just getting started. You people are going to laugh a lot tonight. You're going to have a really good time. We have old here tonight, this gentleman here. We have children here tonight. It's beautiful. So how did we get here? You're probably wondering, Mike, get to the point, dude. We just sat through a 40-minute auction. Come on. So how did we get here? How could this happen? I keep wondering this. 3 hours a day on the radio, on Sirius Satellite Radio. You should get one. I keep wondering, how did this happen? I do this sometimes on the air. That's the sound of me beating my head against the microphone going, how did this happen? This isn't happening. Anybody ever see the movie Aliens? Bill Paxton, right? Game over, man. Game over. Right? Can't be anybody see Terminator? It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse. That's the government. So the title of this little talk tonight is The Problem is the Government. Ronald Wilson Reagan had a problem saying government. He had such disdain for it. He said government. Go back and listen to all of Ronald Reagan's speeches. I challenge you to hear the word government. He said government. Ladies and gentlemen, government is the problem. No, really, seriously. Now, you may ask, Mike, what do you mean when you say government's the problem? Here's what I mean. And this is why this history that we learn, or should learn, and don't learn is so important. You are dealing with, and there was a quote flashing up on the screen earlier from George Washington. He was correct. That quote was from Washington's farewell address. Everyone in this room should go read that. I read it before I came on tonight. Washington said that government is force, brute force. How much brute force do you think the federal government wields today? Way too much, right? How many of you think it wielded way too much in 1980? Ronald Reagan did. How many of you thought, sir, it wielded way too much in 1964 when Reagan gave his famous The Speech, where he called, I know this is shocking, for an end to Social Security. Ronald Reagan said that. How many of you thought it was too big when Franklin Delano Obama Roosevelt tried to take over the economy as Franklin Delano Obama is trying to do in 1934? You could have found someone at every epocha in our history that would have thought that way. So again, how did this happen? It happened because we don't think about government the way the founding generation thought about it. They feared it, folks. They were terrified of it. It was a boogeyman. Ooh. They sat in rooms with candlelights, debating documents, constitutions, articles of confederations, declarations of independence. They were scared to death of it, mortified of it. There is more printed word written prior to the passage of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. 17 September 1787, 35 men, so-called founders. I got to keep saying that because I'm going to buy the New Orleans Saints someday. But not if I'm a racist. So if Obama says they're so-called founders, then they got to be so-called founders. 35 men signed the Constitution on 17 September 1787. Can anyone tell me who the three were who did not? Mike. You telling me people didn't sign the code? Oh. Not only did they not sign it, they went to ratification conventions and begged their peers not to ratify it. Never heard that story, have you? Kind of removed from the history books, isn't it? You ever heard that before? Everyone in this room knows this quote. Give me liberty, or give me death. Right? Yeah. You know anything else that man ever said? Eh? Nothing, right? Why did they wipe Patrick Henry out of the history books? Why? He spoke more than any Virginian of the founding era. He spoke more than Jefferson. Jefferson never uttered a word. He was scared of you people. He was. Madison, gotta talk like this.
Well, I think that maybe our Constitution needs to be reformed.
Nobody could hear Madison. James Monroe, clunky, not a very good speaker. Patrick Henry was the most vocal man in all the Virginia dynasty. 5 first presidents, 4 of them Virginians. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. Titans. Those men were scared to death of government.